What is up, vinyl community? I've donned some special attire tonight because it's a very special day. We are celebrating the best guru on YouTube, the Vinyl Guru. Christina has reached 2,500 subs, so she's thrown a contest. And to celebrate the most charismatic, stylish vinyl community presenter, I decided to don my most charismatic and stylish attire. But I could never hope to live up to the high standard she has set. So, Vinyl Guru, this video is for you. So Christina wanted us to select 5 records and sell the audience on the records, to pitch why people should listen to them. And for someone that has the varied taste that I do, that was a difficult topic. You know, I just done a bunch of videos on classical music, and I could have done some classical picks, done some jazz picks, but I'm a little classicaled out right now. So to sell important records to people, especially to the vinyl guru who has already high standards, I wanted to dig into things that were unique to my musical journey and my musical experience. And that goes back to a lot of the music I was listening to when I was a teenager, when I was kind of dipping my toes into the musical world, into different types of sounds, exploring genres, things like that. So this is going to be a rock video. As I've gotten older, my musical tastes have expanded in every which way, every different direction. I listen to a ton of classic rock nowadays. I've gotten into every niche genre possible, but I grew up on the 2000s. I was a kid in the mid 2000s. So my taste in music is shaped by the countercultural music of everything from early, alternative rock, new metal, punk rock of the mid-2000s, post-hardcore. That all encompasses my journey. So I wanted to share today 5 records that kind of gave me the musical taste that I have today, that kind of helped me in my journey, and pitch why I think they're so important, pitch why I think they're so excellent. And whittling it down to 5 was hard, because anyone who collects music, especially people who, I'm relatively young, my tastes are still changing and evolving. It's impossible for me to just pick my top 5. What's the movie High Fidelity, or top 5
songs about death?
I can't be John Cusack. I can't be making top 5 lists all the time. And just to pick 5 records, I'm sure if I did this video a few days from now, I would have a slightly different list. It was hard to pick 5, but I'm gonna pick some that hopefully will turn some people onto some different music, and you may be familiar with them. Vinyl Guru, I know you have a all-encompassing eclectic taste, so I'm sure you're privy to some of these. The first one I'm going to select is a record that recently celebrated its 20th birthday, its 20th anniversary, and that is the Deftones, White Pony.
It's sharp and cold, see inside my bones. All the seas are on the ground.
White Pony came out on June 20th in the year 2000. The Deftones, or just Deftones, there's no "the" in front of the name, are a alternative rock, new metal, alternative metal, shoegaze, post-metal, whatever you want to call it, experimental metal band from Sacramento, California. And White Pony is their 3rd studio album. The Deftones came around at a time when bands like Faith No More and Rage Against the Machine were on the up and up, so new metal was becoming something that was popular. There was this new heavy aggressive music out there in the late 90s, and the Deftones kind of came up on that wave. Their first album, Adrenaline, was just this pummeling record. Their sophomore release, Around the Fur, had some more spacey elements on it, but it was still very much a nu metal record, like their peers in the genre, bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit. When I first heard about the Deftones, I think I was maybe 12 years old. It was after this album came out. And Linkin Park was hugely popular at the time. I remember I was really into Linkin Park when I was in middle school, and I even got into Limp Bizkit a little bit. That was a dark time in my life, and I've moved on. I'm a different person now. But one band that I listened to a little bit at that time that I always kind of understood to be a little different was Deftones. And White Pony is the album where they kind of differentiated themselves. They did not want to be pigeonholed as a just aggro nu metal band. They had more things to say, more things to do, and White Pony was their dark side of the moon, so to speak. This band brought in so many different influences. It took them almost a year to record. I think there was a lot of cocaine involved, hence the name White Pony, and also apparently a lot of Tony Hawk Pro Skater. They played a lot of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 over the summer when they recorded this. But to me, this is one of the most perfect records, and it's such a groundbreaking album when it dropped, because here was this aggressive, drop-tuned metal band putting in, experimental ambient samples, making really down-tempo, slow songs, taking influence from bands like My Bloody Valentine in a metal album.
I watched you change.
It really was groundbreaking and genre-breaking. And now if you look today, there's tons of metal bands that take all these ambient and cinematic influences. Bands like Deaf Heaven and just other bands that love to incorporate big sweeping soundscapes in aggressive music. And the first band to really do that was largely the Deftones with this album, White Pony. Now, if there was a band I was obsessed with in high school, especially late into high school, 16, 17, 18, it was a power trio from a suburb of Seattle, Washington called The Fall of Troy. This is their sophomore album, Doppelganger. It was recorded when everyone in the band was about 20 years old. These guys were young prodigies. They recorded their first self-titled album, I think when they were still finishing up high school. They were like 18 or something, and they came out with this 2 years later. It actually contains re-recordings of 4 songs on their debut, and they just cranked everything up to 11. Everything is faster, more chaotic, more technical, cleaner. This is what I would imagine the prog punk rock version of Cream to sound like. It's just pummeling power trio progressive punk. Some of the things I love the most about The Fall of Troy is just the energy. They bring so much energy to the table, and that energy is not just aggression in the music, but it's also in the songwriting and the arranging and the incredibly technical guitar playing by lead guitarist Thomas Erak. Erak is kind of an anomaly in some ways because he was a self-taught guitarist, only learning guitar 3 years, I think, before they recorded their debut album. And so he'd been playing guitar for like 5 or 6 years when he recorded this. And the guitar work on here is insane. Before that, he was a drummer, and you can really hear the drumming influences in his guitar playing, and also the way he works with the drummer Andrew Forsman to write drum parts and come up with drum parts that really complement the guitar playing. I think there are really few bands out there that are able to play music as aggressive and chaotic as this, but also technical. You know, a lot of the technical bands, especially the technical bands out there today, especially in post-hardcore, because this is considered post-hardcore, you know, they kind of just stand very still and they play very cleanly, and all their music is very nicely produced, and they got the click track going in their ear, and everything's synced up with Pro Tools, so they got you know, the Fall of Troy, they played in a very old school manner. It's chaotic. Sometimes the sound is sloppy on stage because they're putting their all into it, and there's no click track and there's no post-processing, and it's just live rock and roll, guitar shredding, ear shredding punk music. And that's why this band is so great. And I think everything they've done has just been incredible. It was so tough for me not to grab the album after this, Manipulator, because I think that might be my favorite Fall of Troy album. But for someone that's never listened to the band, this is really the album they established themselves on, Doppelganger. It's really, this is the Fall of Troy sound condensed into a single LP. And this also has the hit single that they really kind of blew up with, which is FCP Remix, which you may know, for those of you who have played, I forget which Guitar Hero it was, but they had a song from this album put on Guitar Hero, and it was their big hit single, FCP Remix. I'm sure if you listen to it, you might recognize it. You know, I think there's very few bands that I listened to that much when I was in high school that I'm still just continuously going back to. It's hard for me to go a certain amount of time without listening to the Fall of Troy because it's just so goddamn good. Somewhere around the mid-2010s, a rapper named Macklemore released a hit single called Downtown. And I heard it on, bits and pieces of it on the radio or, passing, through mall speakers or whatever. And, I kind of ignored it. Like, it went in one ear, out the other, like a lot of top 40 music tends to do. And then one day I heard more of it, and I go, I recognize that voice. Who is that? There's someone on this track that I recognize. And lo and behold, singing on that hit single was the voice of Eric Nally, who I know from the wonderful, quirky band Foxy Shazam. Foxy Shazam were, or I guess now are, I think they just recently got back together, a glam rock band from Cincinnati, Ohio. I don't really know an easy way to describe them, especially when talking about their sophomore album, Introducing Foxy Shazam. Now, Foxy Shazam, when they were around, especially with this album, they started out as a metal or hardcore band. In their first album, The Flamingo Trigger is one of the strangest records I've ever listened to. It's very hard to find. It was released in very small numbers, just independently. But I remember downloading a copy of it when I was in high school, somewhere on like Mediafire or something, and listening to it, and it was just one of the strangest, most eclectic things ever. I listened to the follow-up to that, which is this album, Introducing. And this, I don't know how I describe this. It's like if Queen were a hardcore band. And now their subsequent albums have gotten more and more poppy, more and more radio-friendly. Now the stuff they did after this I would describe more as similar to like The Darkness. But this album, they still had a little bit of their hardcore sound to them, even though they were moving to a more like 70s glam pop direction. So I think this is the best of both worlds. I love records that are transitional records, because to me, I like records that show experimentation and moving through multiple genres. I like that progress, that forward motion. So to me, this is just such a cool album. I remember On my 18th birthday, me and a couple friends drove up from Austin, Texas to Waco, Texas, to a little tattoo parlor. I think it was a tattoo parlor that was also an art space called, I think, Art Ambush, I want to say. And we saw Foxy Shazam play. This was summer of 2010, so about 10 years ago. And I watched this crazy man right here not only, sing with his incredible voice and jump around and flail and do the worm on stage, and then but also collect loose cigarettes from the audience, light them all in one giant mega cigarette, and then consume them while lit. And that's Eric Nally in a nutshell, I think. Not to downplay the rest of the bands. They're incredible musicians. You gotta love any rock band that has a piano player in the mix, and they later added a trumpet player too. But for heavy rock music that has kind of like a style and a showmanship to it, I think Foxy Shazam are hearkening back to a kind of a different age of rock and roll showmanship that we just don't see anymore. So I'm still in Phoenix, Arizona. It was 100 degrees today. This suit is really hot. I'm going to try to get through this video in as little time now as possible because I'm starting to sweat. I want to, as much as I'm tired of t-shirts, there is something to be said for one of the other things that fascinated me when I was a teenager coming to musical age, so to speak, was Japanese rock music, and I stumbled upon it completely at random. And, this was back in the days when the internet was kind of the Wild West. And so, I get things in bits and pieces. And what I was discovering was fascinating. And some bands were more interesting than others. But one band that always stuck with me and everyone always talked about in the forums and whatnot was a band called Dir En Grey. Now, Dir En Grey have been around since the late 90s. They started out as kind of a glam pop band that fit into the typical visual case style of rock music that was really popular in Japan at that time. And they slowly started to evolve and change their sound as they got bigger and bigger. Towards the mid-2000s, they started getting some international presence and started touring more internationally in Europe and North America. And they kind of had started adopting a slightly more Western sound, still very Japanese, musically, but they had adopted kind of a new metal sound, so to speak. They did some tours with Korn, and they actually did some tours with the Deftones. And fun fact, in 2007, they did a tour with the Deftones, and the opener on some of the dates was The Fall of Troy. So there are 3 bands on this list that have toured together. And, I discovered Dir En Grey around 2005, 2006, and I started kind of biting into their discography and realizing how different each album was. But nothing really prepared me for 2008 when they would release what I still think is the best album they've ever made, and that's 2008's Uroboros. If this album art is giving you deja vu, it's because it was designed to be an homage to King Crimson's 70s album Lizard. If you get this, and I'll put it on the screen, the album art to Lizard. So we're already here. Even the album art is evoking progressive rock. This album was just a totally new thing for the band. They really expanded beyond the kind of punk, hard, heavy metal, and new metal sounds they were experimenting with in the mid 2000s, and really started exploring progressive metal and death metal and all these crazy experimental stuff. I can't help but think that Dir En Grey touring with the Deftones in 2007 had something to do with like expanding the sonic landscape of their sound. But there's definitely more influences here than the Deftones, so I don't want to short sell Dir En Grey. But no, I think this album is just a prog metal masterpiece, and it has some of the most dark and brutal moments and some of the most like open, sweeping, beautiful moments. There's like 3 gorgeous ballads on this album, and some really heavy death metal stuff. The opening track, Venushka, has become a fan favorite. In my opinion, it might be the best song they've ever written. I don't think you can go wrong with this album. Anyone who's into any type of metal at all should give this a listen. It's really different, and probably highlighted by the vocals of their lead singer, Kyo, who, had kind of been experimenting with different vocal styles throughout their career. But this was the first album where he really, really put in an effort to stretch his abilities, and it shows. I mean, he hit some of the highest notes of his discography. And yet he's able to create so many different unclean sounds, low growls, piercing high screams, whistle fries that very few singers are able to do. In my experience, it's very rare that you see a vocalist progress so much through a band's discography as Kyo from Dir En Grey has. If anything, a lot of singers lose their mojo after, a couple albums in, whereas this guy seems to just be able to keep pushing and pushing himself. This album actually starts what I would call like the trio of really beefy progressive albums this band put out. They put out an incredibly dark progressive death metal album in 2011, Dum Spiro Spero, and then a kind of beautiful sweeping art metal album in 2014 called Arche. But I still think this is the one to go for. This is the one to start with. This is the one to start your journey with the band on. It hasn't really left my rotation since it came out. This is the American vinyl pressing put out by The End Records, and it is very, very much unobtainium at this point. You just can't get it. But that's okay, because in 2012, the album was remastered, and I will say that the remastering sounds so much better than the original. In the original, the drums are incredibly boomy. There's just too much echo effect going on. Details get lost in the mix, and the 2012 remix called Uroboros Remastered and Expanded is much better. This is the one to get. It's still easily available. So, I'm the vinyl person. I like having vinyl records, but if I have to listen to this album, I'm pulling this one out. All right, last record. So for the last record, I'm changing things up a bit. We're leaving the 2000s and going into the 2010s, specifically 2019, last year, because, while I grew up in the punk and hardcore scene, I grew up with all these bands from the 2000s and going to shows in the late 2000s, early 2010s. And, really, my undergrad, it's like I was going to a show every weekend. That's something that has fallen off in recent years, before the pandemic, I mean. And I think it's because there just seems to be a lull in a lot of punk-inspired music lately. There's still great heavy music being made. I think there's incredibly interesting things happening in like black metal music, for instance. And there's definitely some interesting rock music being made, but my tastes have just kind of expanded, and the genres that kind of nursed me have stopped producing music that I found super interesting, at least on a large scale, like it once did. However, there is a band that is making music right now that scratches that itch for me, and that's some friends of mine in a band called Glassing. their 2019 sophomore album, Spotted Horse. It is absolutely incredible. I'm so proud of these guys for what they've been able to do. Glassing, like the Fall of Troy, are a power trio. However, their sound, couldn't be further apart. These guys take they come from the format of like underground screamo and power violence and this crushingly heavy music that people play in living rooms. I think actually one of the first times I saw Glassing was in their living room in Austin, Texas. But there's so much more in this music, and Glassing are able to take that formula and really stretch out and create beautiful soundscapes in many ways that the Deftones were able to, but kind of with a different setup and a different core style. I mean, this band, some of the soundscapes on this record remind me of moments from stuff like Deaf Heaven. There's big shoegaze influences here, post-rock, bands like This Will Destroy You, and You'll Know Us by the Trail of Dead. There's a lot of that in here underneath some incredibly pummeling drums. Dustin is the bass player and he does the vocals. His vocals are just the most piercing, shrill things ever. It's like howling from another dimension. It's perfect. His bass playing, especially on this record, actually comprises the meat of the sound. And then the guitarist, Corey Brim, brilliant guitarist, layers his guitar over the sound. It's like the guitar is singing on top of everything. So it's really it's almost like the guitar is providing the lines that the vocals normally would, and the vocals are acting as a percussive effect against the rest of the music. So even if this type of like super heavy underground music is not your thing, I recommend giving Glassing a try, because they bridge so many different genres together well. They're able to create music that is incredibly touching and beautiful, but at the same time can be brutal and soul-crushing. If you like any type of post-rock, post-metal, or post-anything, you're going to like this 2019 album, Spotted Horse by Glassing. It's incredible. So as part of this contest, we were supposed to pick an album that we would like to receive if we are selected to be the winner. And I think there's no album more appropriate to request in this video than the new 2020 release from Deftones, Ohms. It's something that I've just put off buying until now, and it came out a couple days ago. So if I win, I hope to get that. I'm sure it will be just as incredible as all their last releases, and you should all go listen to it. I'm kind of embarrassed that I haven't yet, but I'm waiting for the vinyl, because when you listen to an album the first time, you gotta listen to it on vinyl. So, Christina, Vinyl Guru, congratulations on 2,500 subs after 6 months on this platform. You're putting us all to shame. You make us look horrible. You may have only been here for half a year, but you're schooling all of us. So congratulations on the growth. You've earned it. I'm sorry I didn't have an awesome hat to wear. I'm not a hat guy. But while you're watching this video, you can pretend I am tipping a very decorative hat to you. Cheers.